What's up, YouTube? Tim Moose here. Here is my Throwback segment where I talk about the films that turns 10, 20, 30, and 40 this week. Alright, the film celebrating their 10th anniversary is the last Hobbit movie, which was, of course, The Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies. Now, I admit, this was probably the weakest out of the Hobbit films. I think Desolation of Smaug, which, I'm not like the world's hugest Lord of the Rings guy or anything like that. Like, the Lord of the Rings movies are fine and everything. To be honest, I've always been more of the Harry Potter more than Lord of the Rings, but I still quite get a kick out of them. And Battle of the Five Armies was actually not bad, just not as great as the first Hobbit was or anything like that. Which of course this pretty much concludes the adventure of Bilbo Baggins, played by Martin Freeman, and Doran Oakeshill's company of the dwarves who take possession of the treasure beneath the lonely mountains of various factions here. And it's actually, again, it's not really like a great one, but it's actually not bad in my opinion. Alright, also turning 10 is the remake of Annie. Now this actually got some okay reviews, but oh boy, I remember when this thing was getting released, people was all, if you think people were complaining about a brown Snow White for the Snow White film, or a black Black Ariel for Little Mermaid, people was complaining more about a Black Annie at the time. And that Annie movie, I don't care what anyone says, was awesome. Was it as good as like the original film with Carol Burnett? Obviously not. But I still quite enjoyed it. You had Quvenzhané Wallace coming off of her Oscar nomination for Beast of a Southern Wild. She was a really great Annie. You also had like Cameron Diaz, which, believe it or not, this was actually Cameron Diaz's last movie before her retiring. Thank heavily she's coming back next month for that new Jamie Foxx film, so it's pretty cool. Of course, it had Jamie Foxx as Danny Warbucks. Bobby Cannavale was in this. I actually had a fun time with it. The music was pretty decent. Quvenzhané Wallace was really good. The one who plays like her orphan friends in this, they've actually grew up to do some pretty interesting films too. So yeah, I really quite enjoyed it a lot. If you guys haven't seen that 2014 Annie, I'd say give it a go. You might enjoy it, or you might not enjoy it either way, but it's a really terrific one. It is really charming. The music's pretty decent. Good performances here. I believe Quvenzhané Wallace got a Golden Globe nomination for this, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong there. Alright. Also turning 10 is Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb. Sadly, this movie was actually the final film that Robin Williams starred in. And I remember watching this, and there was like a scene where Theodore Roosevelt, played by the late great Robin Williams, was like waving to the audience, and I'm not gonna lie, I sort of weeped a little bit when I first saw this, because like when he was like waving to the audience, it really felt like he was saying goodbye to everyone, and yeah, that who would ever expect you could ever weep during a Night at the Museum film? But yeah, and of course it was directed by Sean Levy. I mean, of course, it was the last Night at the Museum film, and I actually had a fun time with it. It was a pretty entertaining one. You also had a fun cameo by Hugh Jackman, which was pretty cool. Dan Stevens was also in this. Sadly, again, it is really unfortunate because this was the final film in general starring Robert Williams, and he really made the '90s museum films very fun. Like I always loved the Theodore Roosevelt character, and Robin just played that character perfectly. And yeah, it was a shame. I still remember when the news broke about Robin's passing. I'm not gonna lie, that death really hit me hard because I grew up watching Robin Williams stuff, whether it's like Aladdin, Mrs. Doubtfire. Like who doesn't love Robin Williams? And he was just like, I pretty much grew up watching his stuff, and it was like a real shame when he passed. But if you guys never really seen the Night at the Museum films, definitely give them a go. Also turning 10 is the movie Mr. Turner, which is directed by Mike Leigh, who also has that new film Hard Truths out 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 now. Of course, that has that's getting tons of Oscar buzz. Mr. Turner starred famed British actor Timothy Spall, who played British painter J.M.W. Turner, who lives his 25 years with gusto and secretly becomes involved with a seaside landlady here. And it's actually an okay one. I mean, Timothy Spall, who of course was in the Harry Potter films. I believe he played I can't remember who he played in that. I think he played like the I forgot the character's name, but the rat in the Harry Potter films or something like that. But Timothy Spall is always really good when he's in stuff. So, all right. Well, now films turning 20 this week. We got a lot to talk about here. We got Million Dollar Baby. Now, Million Dollar Baby was directed by Clint Eastwood and was a film that won Hilary Swank her second Oscar. And if you guys don't know much about it, it stars Hilary Swank as Margaret Maggie Fitzgerald, who's an underdog amateur boxer who is helped by an unappreciated boxer trainer played by Eastwood to achieve her dream of becoming a boxing professional. Now, the movie got a little controversy at the time because it protested the film's ending, arguing that it perpetrated the stereotypes that people with disability have poor quality, and criticized the film for representing disability as a deficit, which, yeah, that would have been talked about a lot on on Twitter today. But yeah, Million Dollar Baby was still a pretty decent one. Clint Eastwood did a great job. Of course, oh yeah, this movie actually won Morgan Freeman his first ever Oscar, which is insane to believe, by the way. Like this is literally like Morgan Freeman literally won his first ever Oscar for this film. Like I still think he should have won for Shawshank Redemption, Driving Miss Daisy, but no, it was Million Dollar Baby that won him his Oscar. Which, hey, don't get me wrong, he was good in that, but I think he had better performances that he could have won an Oscar with. But anyway, all right. Also turning 10 or 20, I should say, is Martin Scorsese's Oscar film The Aviator, which I think they actually scored a couple of nominations, if I'm not mistaken. Now, this starred Leo DiCaprio as Howard Hughes, the aviation pioneer and director of the film Hell's Angel. The film portrays his life from 1927 to 74. During the time, Hughes became a successful film producer and an aviation magnate while growing more unstable due to obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, you also had like Gwen Stefani was in this, who I believe she played Ava Gardner, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, oh no, Kate Beckinsale played Ava Gardner. My bad. Jude Law, again, 2004 was like his big year. I mean, if you want to know an actor who had probably one of the biggest years of his career, it was probably Jude Law in 2004. Because that year alone, he had like Alfie, I Heart Huckabees, he had Closer. I'm trying to remember what else he had. Yeah, well, Sky Captain. I'm like, boy, he was like everywhere in 2004. But he was still pretty solid in this here. Of course, Alan. Yeah, this took on a couple of Oscar nominations. I believe, I think Alan Alda got a nomination for this, if I'm not mistaken. You also had John C. Reilly was in this. Alec Baldwin, um, William Dafoe. I mean, the list goes on and on. Of course, I believe Kate Blanchett actually won her first Oscar for this film. She of course played Katharine Hepburn. She was really solid in this too. So really terrific film. Like definitely one of Scorsese's. It's pretty much like his love letter to to the golden age of Hollywood. So all right. Speaking of true story films, also turning 20 is Beyond the Sea, which of course stars Kevin Spacey as Bobby Darin, who co-wrote, directed, and produced the film, which takes its title from the Darin song of the same name. It depicts Darin's rise to success in both the music and film industry during the 1950s and 60s, as well as his marriage to Sandra Dee, portrayed by Kate Bosworth. You also had John Goodman, who was in this. I know it's a little awkward talking about Kevin Spacey nowadays, but take the controversy aside, Kevin Spacey is still a terrific actor. Whether it's American Beauty, whether it's The Usual Suspect, I mean, Kevin Spacey is still always amazing, or was always amazing, and he was actually pretty good, Bobby Darin. So definitely, if you guys never seen him, I'd say give it a go. Alright, also turning 20 is the terrible remake of Flight of the Phoenix. Now, this was directed by John Moore, starring the likes of Dennis Quaid, Tyrese Gibson, Giovanni Ribisi, Hugh Laurie. And it's, of course, a remake of like a 1965 film of the same name, about a group of people who survived an aircraft crash in Gobi Desert, and must build a new aircraft out of like the old one to escape. And it is horrible. Definitely a terrible remake. Nothing about it was all that interesting. The action wasn't even all that good. I mean, Dennis Quaid's like career hasn't always been the best, and this was definitely one of them. All right. Also turning 20 is Lemony Snickets, A Series of Fortunate Events, which is based on the very popular children's book of the same name, which also got turned into a TV show with Neil Patrick Harris. This also starred the likes of Meryl Streep, the aforementioned Timothy Spall, uh, Liam Eichen, Emily Browning, who of course go on to do stuff like Sucker Punch, and this was like her earliest film. And again, you also had Jude Law voicing the voice of Lemony Snicket. Again, 2004 was like his pretty much big year. And it's actually a pretty decent one. Jim Carrey, of course, as as the lead role was pretty solid here. Of course, Jim Carrey's always amazing. The fantasy aspect was pretty good. It was directed by Brad Sibberling, who's directed other stuff here and there. Now, the Neil Patrick Harris one was okay, but nothing beats the Jim Carrey word version. All right, also turning 20 is Spanglish. Now, Spanglish was directed by James L. Brooks, who of course gave us stuff like The Simpsons. He's also done like I don't remember what else he done. Oh yeah, he done Terms of Endearment. I mean, James L. Brooks is a really solid filmmaker, and this of course is a movie that starred Adam Sandler, Taylor Leone, Cloris Leachman, Thomas Hayden Church, Sarah Hyland, Amy Garcia was in this. If you guys don't know much about the story for Spanglish, it stars Paz Vega, who I used to always had a crush on Paz Vega. Like Paz Vega was well, actually she still is always amazing. Who finds housekeeping work with Deborah, played by Taylor Leone, and John Kleski, played by Adam Sandler. Who's a well-off couple with two children of their own. And when she admits that she can't handle the schedule because of her daughter Christina, she decides to move into the classy house, and of course cultures clash here. And it's actually a pretty decent one. Of course, this was one of Adam Sandler's most it's still a comedy, but it was more like his one of his most serious roles and all. And he was pretty decent in this. Probably one of Adam Sandler's most underrated, underappreciated films. Whenever you think of his dramatic work, you always talk about Punch Drunk Love, Even Rain Over Me, obviously Uncut Gems. I feel like people don't really talk about Spanglish as much. It's actually a really decent little film if you guys haven't seen that. And by the way, I cannot wait for James L. Brooks' next film. It's crazy to believe he has not done a film since 2010. But he has a new film coming out next year called Ella McKay, I think it's called. So it's always nice to see James L. Brooks back. Alright, also turning 30, speaking of Jim Carrey, uh, by the way, Sonic 3 comes out this week, so great time to talk about Jim Carrey. Also turning 30 is Dumb and Dumber. Not the first film which actually turned 10, but oh no, actually yeah, the second turns 10. But the first Dumb and Dumber, starring Jim Carrey as Lloyd Christmas, Jeff Daniels as Harry Dunn, who of course directed by the Farrelly brothers, who I believe this was their first feature, if I'm not mistaken. The original Dumb and Dumber is just an all-time common classic. 1994 really was a great year for Jim Carrey. He was coming off of stuff like, Ace Ventura. He had The Mask that year, and he also had Dumb and Dumber. So talk about a great year it was for him in '94. And his chemistry with Jeff Daniels is always great. Dumb and Dumber is a comic classic. It's a lot of fun, loads of fun moments. The toilet scene always cracks me up every time. But yeah, if you guys never seen the original Dumb and Dumber, definitely get that one go. I wouldn't mind seeing a third one down the line, but anyway. Now other films turning 30, we got the Jodie Foster film titled Nell, which starred Liam Neeson alongside his late wife and actress Natasha Richardson, who you might know from the Parent Trap fame. And it's actually a pretty fun, decent little film. It's of course has Jodie Foster who produces it, as a Nell Kelty who is a young woman who has to face other people for the first time after being raised by her mother in an isolated cabin. And of course, you had Nick Searcy was in this. It's a really decent little film. Jodie Foster did a great job. Directed by Michael Epty, who did a decent job here. So not a bad little film. All right, also turning 30, we got Speechless, which stars Batman himself, Michael Keaton, and Superman himself, Christopher Reeve. You also had Gina Davis, of course, a Beetlejuice reunion here. I mean, Speechless is a really decent little film. I mean, this is probably the closest thing we ever got to see Michael Keaton and Christopher Reeve starring. Because I used to always wish we got like a Batman and Superman film with those two starring. That would have been one of the most highest, like, best films of that era. But anyway, now of course this is where, like, in the season of New Mexico, political speechwriters Julian Mann, played by Gina Davis, and of course Michael Keaton as Kevin Valek, who's a Republican who begins a romance. And of course you have Christopher Reeve, who plays like a self-observed TV reporter named Bob Freed. And it's not a bad little film though. I mean, I feel like this movie is definitely a really interesting watch around like the political climate nowadays. And of course, Gina Davis was pretty decent. Mikey Keough was pretty good. It's an okay little film. All right. Also turning for 30, we got Immortal Beloved, which is a film directed by Candyman director Bernard Russo and starring Gary Oldman, and is of course about composer Beethoven, played by Oldman, in like flashbacks, and it's an okay little film. Of course, Gary Oldman, not like his best work or anything like that, but he definitely embodied Beethoven perfectly. Gary Oldman, talk about a great career, like, from the likes of playing Dracula to Sid Vicious to Winston Churchill. He's always had an interesting knack of playing real life people, and he was pretty solid in this one, so not a bad little film. All right, now films turning 40. Not a lot to really talk about here. We got The River, directed by Mark Rydell, starring the likes of Mel Gibson, Sissy Spacek, and tells the story of a struggling farm family in Tennessee River Valley, who tries to keep its farm from going under the face of the bank foreclosures and floods here. And it's a really decent little one. Mel Gibson and Sissy Spacek, they both had really decent chemistry here. Scott Glenn was pretty good, so not a bad film to check out. All right, also turning 40, we got this. Oh yeah, also turning 40 is one of the worst movies of the 1980s, one of the worst sequels of all time. Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. That's right, Electric Boogaloo turns 40 years old this week. Of course, pretty much, was one of like Ice-T's earliest films. It is of course a sequel to the 1984 film Break In, and it's awful. This movie is terrible, man. Nothing about it's redeemable. This scored tons of Razzies. I don't know how many it scored, but yeah, it's pretty much like a sequel that gets talked about all the time. Lots of people reference this thing a whole lot, and it's just a terrible one, not that good at all. But that's pretty much it there. Let me let you guys. Which of these films stand out to you the most? To me, the 10-year one is, I should say, Night at the Museum or The Hobbit. I'm actually gonna say Annie. Annie is, if you guys have not seen that 2014 Annie, I think give it a go. It's a really solid little remake. Although the other two are pretty decent. All right, the 21. This one's a little bit hard one, but I'll probably say with the 21, The Aviator. That if The Aviator is excellent. The dirty one, obviously Dumb and Dumber, and I guess the 4-year one, The River. Not anything should go by there, but I I should probably say Breaking Two because that's just one of the best worst movies of all time. But anyway, drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell for notification. This is Serious.